Welcome to Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church on Zoom. We respectfully recognize that our church property rests on Ahachimand and Tongva land. My name is Yulis Aiton, and I'm your worship associate today. I'm joined by Beth Syverson, our Director of Music Ministries, in welcoming you this morning. Reverend Judy, our Director of Religious Education, already held classes for the children earlier this morning, and she will offer one for our youth after the service. We also would like to recognize the many volunteers that have helped to put this service together today. You can see their names on the screen. This morning, as part of our effort to make our service more accessible, we have enabled closed captioning throughout our service. Each participant can individually control whether to display the subtitles or hide them. If you would like to turn on or turn off the subtitles, please see the detailed instructions that we are sending you through the chat. Our minister, Reverend Sean Wilshire, is not leading the service today, but she has a message for you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're having an absolutely fabulous day. I know you're going to have an absolutely fabulous, wonderful service. So, for those of you who may not know me, I'm Reverend Sean Wilshire, and I proudly serve this wonderful, beloved community. It really is fabulous. And that's what I encourage you to do. If you're new, you haven't quite gotten to know people, or you're just kind of coming in and lurking a little bit, that's okay. But what I really encourage you to do is get to know this community. And one of the best ways to do that is at the end of the service, we have these 20 minutes of breakout sessions to get to know people. And the nice thing is that everybody in there is in the same boat. It's random who gets put in there, so there's no real cliques going on or that sort of thing. That can happen sometimes, when we do in-person church, people get together with their friends, and that's totally cool and wonderful. But this way, you get to know new people and different people, which is just wonderful. And everybody's there. So, and this is a really friendly bunch. They are truly wonderful, loving, beautiful people, and I can't wait for you to get to know them. So I encourage you to do that. All right, without further ado, have an absolutely fabulous service.
Today, our special guest speaker is Lawrence Ingalls. Lawrence Ingalls has held the position of Finance Manager of the Technology Transfer Office at Caltech for almost 12 years. He has an MBA from Pepperdine University, and he has been the in-person guest speaker or guest musician at 21 UU congregations in multiple states and several spiritualist churches online. In California, he has been the guest speaker at our Costa Mesa, Laguna Beach, Anaheim, Fullerton, and Sepulveda congregations. He is a native of California, and he is of Latino, Irish, and Native American descent. He is also married to a UU minister. And today, Lawrence will be talking about parallels between the COVID and AIDS pandemic and how open, transparent debate is not always a good thing. I'd like to invite you to open the chat box, and if you haven't already, say hello this morning. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many different beliefs, but we are one loving community. We are bound together not by a common set of rules or beliefs, but rather a covenant. A covenant is simply a promise that whatever our beliefs, we accept one another and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We affirm that all life has inherent value and that all existence is interconnected. We strive for justice and compassion in our deeds and relationships, and we are committed to creating a welcoming community without regard to the traits that sometimes divide people. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you will find it here. After the service, we will be placing everyone who remains into Zoom breakout rooms for 20 minutes of coffee and conversation. Everyone is welcome to join in, and it's a great way to get to know people in the congregation. Our worship begins with the lighting of our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalist tradition. And as we light it, we say our unison affirmation. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, we can light them together. Please join me now as we begin. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. This we affirm together.
We are gathered in the Spirit, though our bodies are apart, filled with joy and touched with wonder, separate hands but mingled hearts, giving thanks and singing praises for the love that calls us on. From our many different places, we are gathered into one. We are gathered in our sorrow, we are gathered in our fear, in our pain and in our worry, in our anger and our tears, as we tend to one another with our gifts and with our care. Our community is strengthened through the faith and hope we share. We are gathered in commitment to a planet that is whole. Works of justice, acts of kindness, bless the world and heal our souls. As our voices join together, may our song of peace resound. May we offer in abundance all the grace that we have found.
Good morning. Unitarian Julia Ward Howe is credited with having created Mother's Day. The thing is, I was originally scheduled to speak here a few weeks from now and not today, so I didn't write anything about Mother's Day, but I couldn't just ignore the fact that one of us had created today's holiday. So her name was Julia Ward Howe. That's my nod to her. It's kind of the only thing I'm going to say about her. This is, can you see that? Because I can't see myself all of a sudden on the screen. So hopefully you can see that. But this is my mom, but it looks just like her when she was that age. That was Edie Gourmet, who was kind of a trailblazer. Here, let me do this. There we go. Nope, still can't see myself. Okay, so here, there we go. I'm gonna do this here. All right, now I can see that. So that's Edie Gourmet. And the thing about her was she had top 20 songs on both the English and Spanish music charts at the same time in the 1950s and the 1960s. So she was kind of a trailblazer because that's rare to do even today. She was super popular with my family, which is composed mostly of Latino and Irish Catholics. So everyone could listen to the same singer in their own native language and then argue about which album to put on during family gatherings. If you grew up in a California Latino family in the 60s or the 70s, the chances are really good that you had this album because we all did. So at the height of its popularity, my mother worked in downtown Los Angeles and she looked just like that. And people would stop her and they'd say, oh, you're not Edie Gourmet. And she'd say, no, I'm not, but I get that a lot, thanks. There's a song on that album called Di que no es verdad, which means say it isn't true. And I chose that to talk about because I have known 6 people who have died of COVID in the last year. And I want to quote for you just the first few lines of that song, which are, Con el alma llena de amargura y sin saber qué hacer, he venido aquí con esta duda a escuchar tu voz. Vi que no es verdad. And what that means is, with a soul full of bitterness and without knowing what to do, I came here with this doubt to hear your voice. Say it isn't true. Of the 6 people that I've known who died of COVID in the last year, all but one of them was either a person of color like my mom or not heterosexual like me. I'm sure you already know that disease in general affects marginalized people more adversely than the majority. But I wanted to open this morning by saying to my 6 people and to the 3.2 million others who have passed in the last year, and also to my mom and to her mom, we remember you. We will always remember you. And we thank you for touching our lives.
If your heart always did what a normal heart should do, if you always play a part instead of being who you really are, then you might just miss the one who's standing there. So instead of passing by, show him that you care. Instead of asking why me and why you, why not we too? 'Cause love don't need a reason. Love don't always rhyme, and love is all we have for now. What we don't have is time. If we always believe all the madness that we're taught, never questioning the rules, then we're living lies we bought so long ago. How are they to know it's not who's wrong or right? It's just another way. And I don't wanna fight, but I know I'm gonna stay with you till the end, with you, my friend. 'Cause love don't need a reason. Love don't always rhyme, and love is all we have for now. What we don't have is time. I'll hold you close, time can't tear us apart. Forever I will stand by you. It's got to start with the beat of one heart. Together we will see this through, 'cause love don't need a reason. Love's never a crime, and love is all we have for now. What we don't have, what we don't have is time.
The reading is super short this morning. It's actually a meme that I saw on social media, but it's so relevant I had to share it. It said, yes, lockdown poses its own mental health challenges, but can we please stop pretending our former world of long working hours, stressful commutes, hectic crowds, shopping centers, infinite choice, mass consumerism, air pollution, and 24/7 everything was a mental health utopia? I love that one. Had to share it.
Mm-hmm. Please join me. We grieve the
The older you get, the more quickly time seems to pass. When I was a child, it seemed like Christmas came every 2 or 3 years, and now it seems like roughly every 5 months, it's Christmas again. Scientists have studied this phenomenon. The more familiar something is, the faster time seems to go while you're experiencing that familiar thing. So when you go away for vacation, that seems to take longer than if you stay home and take the same amount of time off of work. The unfamiliarity and the newness of an unknown location takes more of your attention and more of your effort to interact with it, and that makes it seem to take longer. I'm calling this talk 1 year later because it's been a little more than a year since my husband and I went into a hardcore lockdown. We had virtually no in-person interactions with the outside world for more than a year, except for 2 really quick instances where we were outside and masked and 10 to 15 feet away from one other individual. Other than that, we've only seen real live in-person people on our daily walks, but then we do this constant street crossing game to avoid them. Everything we need is delivered to our house, and we haven't opened our door until after the delivery person is gone. Because I've known 6 people who have died of COVID and several more who have gotten really sick but survived, I don't regret our extreme precautions. I very nearly lost my oldest and dearest friend, a woman named Patty, when she'd been in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And then I was told she was going to be intubated and put on a ventilator. I pulled my husband aside and I told him that my brother, who's been in my life since the day I was born, and Patty, who's been there since I was 10 years old, they are my longest long-term relationships, and I was going to lose it if Patty died. I was out of my mind with panic, and then she got better. But this past year has reminded me, for the first time in a long time, just how long 12 full months really is. Just before the pandemic started, I was discussing with a church group why there aren't more lesbians and gay men in UU churches. We certainly want them. UUs were among the first denominations to perform same-sex marriage ceremonies, and many of us pride ourselves on being social justice types, right? A senior citizen woman who's a friend of mine nudged me playfully and she said, I want more gay friends, but older, like me, you know, retired instead of always at work, like you and Jason. She's wonderful and I love her, but I didn't quite know how to phrase my response. So I finally just said, well, you're never going to see a lot of gay men in their 60s or 70s in anyone's congregations because most of them are dead. Most of the young men who died in the AIDS pandemic in their 20s and 30s would be in their 60s and 70s today. I didn't mean for it to be a downer statement, but it was one of those moments where the whole room gets quiet and everyone's attention turns to you. As a gay man of a certain age, our current coronavirus pandemic has me thinking, remembering, dwelling on my young adult life and the AIDS pandemic. For people just a little bit older than I, this COVID-19 pandemic has been very triggering. There's so many parallels in weirdly specific ways, deliberate misinformation certainly being one of those ways. My oldest brother he's also gay, and we just happen to have been born the 10 years apart that are some of the most critical for the gay community. My older brother has no gay male friends at all from his young adult life. They all died, all of them. For gay men my brother's age, it was normal all through their 20s to attend multiple funerals every month, sometimes more than once a week. I personally only know 2 men who have died of AIDS. Unlike my brother, I have friends from every era of my life going all the way back to grammar school. I automatically received a far more stable and happier footing in life than the gay men who came before me. Still, the AIDS pandemic did shape much of my young adult life. When my brother entered the gay community, there were already gay men in it who had been there for decades. Those men had been friended and mentored by the men before them, and those were the decades when LGBTQ folks were much more likely to be shunned and turned out onto the streets by their own families and their friends and certainly their employers. In gay ghettos, West Hollywood in Los Angeles, the Castro District in San Francisco, Greenwich Village in New York, your neighbors and your friends became your support system, and in many cases became your family. And then those people started to die by the thousands all at once. I was a late bloomer. So even though my brother is 10 years older than I entered the gay community about 15 years after he did. It took me a long time to figure out that I'm gay. But by then, there were no mentors. There were no elders. Whole community structures that had been there for decades had collapsed. Churches, theaters, community service organizations, Choirs, orchestras, sports teams, neighborhood parties, regularly scheduled events of all kinds were only memories when I entered the gay community. My generation of gay men were pretty much starting from scratch, and most of us had no idea what we were doing. That naivety, in some ways, was kind of a bonus. It had just never occurred to many in the previous generation to expect to be legally married. And the few who did were often psychologically beaten down by other LGBTQ folks and told it was never going to happen. When my generation came along, there just weren't that many older than us people there to tell us that legal marriage for same-sex couples was just a fantasy that we shouldn't waste our time on. So I spent all of my young adult life and a majority of my entire adult life working toward the legalization of same-sex marriage. The survivors that people like me encountered when I entered the gay community, the people already there who hadn't died, in my experience, they fell into two very broad categories. Those who were bitter about their losses, about the national response to AIDS or the lack of it, and how their loved ones had been treated because they had died of AIDS. Back then, people despised you for having AIDS. They were disgusted by you. Healthcare workers refused to help you. It was nothing at all like dying of cancer or any other cause. The other broad category, besides the bitter, were the shell-shocked, people who were overwhelmed by the losses of individual loved ones as well as community structures. They didn't come across to me as bitter, but they were also not at all eager about being friends or opening their hearts to new people or new ways of being in community, because that just meant new loved ones to also lose and also mourn when we died, they assumed, of AIDS. Also, the gay community my brother entered into 15 years before me was focused on community, those regularly scheduled events like brunch and choir and softball practice in the morning and then bars and clubs late at night. The gay community I entered into was hyper-focused on AIDS and hyper-focused on politics, like same-sex marriage. So my brother entered the gay community in the late 1970s, and I finally got married in 2008, after 12 years of 3 separate domestic partnership contracts, all with the same man. We got domestically partnered with the city of West Hollywood first, then with the state of California, then again with the state of California when the laws changed, and then eventually we got legally married. So my husband and I have 4 different anniversary dates. It never occurred to us to do it on the same date each time. It's obvious now that that would have been a good idea, but it was not obvious in the moment. And here we find ourselves again in another global pandemic. But this one affects everybody. So the global and national responses have been better. Unfortunately, you may have noticed that many countries have handled this better than the United States. Unlike many other countries in the world, the United States does not have a living memory of doing battle or sheltering in place on our own shores, in our own homes. And I think in living memory are the key words there. We had a civil war, but everyone who participated in that is long dead. And even when we were attacked on our own shores at Pearl Harbor during my mom's early childhood, that wasn't on the main continent. And I think it's critical that we went somewhere else to fight that battle. We went to other countries. We went to other continents to fight. We did not shelter in place and do battle in our own neighborhoods here. We had the extraordinary good geographic luck of having Canada to our north, Mexico to our south, and being bounded by 2 world oceans on both our eastern and western borders. The other obvious problem the United States has is that of the 19 modern industrialized nations in the world, we are the only ones who on the whole planet that tie easy access to medical care to having a job. So when millions of people suddenly found themselves out of work through no fault of their own, they also suddenly had no health insurance at a time when they needed it the most. Also, politicians of both major parties tend to be either personally, financially well off, or at least financially stable. And there's this mindset in American politics that individual citizens should have at least 6 months savings to tide them over in an emergency in unforeseen situations. And we've been in this way longer than 6 months. But multi-billion dollar corporations should immediately receive financial bailouts in times like these. A lot of people call that socialism for corporations and capitalism for individual citizens. If we took exactly the same amount of corporate bailout money and instead used it to make monthly payments to individual citizens, corporations would automatically be saved as we continued to buy their products. Gasoline, eggs, hair dye, pasta, and only those corporations that are not useful to the economy would be in trouble. But their employees wouldn't be in trouble because they'd be the ones receiving the payments. Seems like an obvious solution, but how many Democrats or Republicans who hold public office do you hear proposing anything like that solution. It's easy to forget how quickly time passes and how much time has passed. I think I said in a different talk for this church that it's hard for me to wrap my head around that 1990 was more than 30 years ago. The early 90s really does feel like 7 or 8 years ago to me. And I wonder if this helps to explain some people's attitudes and beliefs about some social issues. And I'm talking about fairly liberal people who want to argue and debate things, intending to be helpful, but never realizing how hurtful and aggravating it is that they're debating certain topics at all. In my experience, argument and debate is used by conservatives to maintain the status quo, and argument and debate is used by liberals to bring about change. But some liberals don't seem to realize that argument and debate that goes on for too many years can both maintain the status quo and fuel conservatives because it gives them a forum to air their views. I would hope it's obvious to most liberals that some arguments and debates are done, like whether or not Americans should own slaves or whether or not women should be able to vote. And let me just touch really quickly on the passing of time again. My grandma was born in 1912. We were super close. When she was a young woman, she knew older people who had been slaves when they were young. They'd only been freed 40-something years before she was born. So my grandma knew people who had been property at one point in their lives, human beings who had no more legal standing than shoes or furniture. When all 4 of my grandparents were children, women could not vote in the United States. When I was a child, interracial marriage was still illegal in this country. When I was a boy in the 1970s, I remember TV commercials urging married women to get credit cards and bank accounts in their own name now that they could. My husband and I had been together for most of our adult lives, but we only legally married just a few years ago. And today, in most of the United States, it's perfectly legal to fire me from my job or evict me from my apartment for no other reason than that I am gay. That's a nasty surprise for some same-sex couples who get legally married and then immediately get fired or evicted because people find out that they're gay. It is challenging to wrap your head around the fact that while you can now legally marry, you can still be fired or evicted for that marriage in the year 2021. So back to debating and arguing in an effort to be helpful. In my experience, some liberals tend to skew toward an attitude of, we need to have open, transparent discussion about fill in the blank. I have to tell you, I'm done discussing whether or not I should be legally married. I'm done discussing openly, transparently, freely, whether or not I should serve in the military. I dug through a grocery store dumpster for food as a child because my single parent mom was paid so poorly compared to her male counterparts who did exactly the same jobs. Don't ask me to debate whether or not women should be paid equally. And this may be the most important point to make today. I was done with those conversations years before the people around me caught up with me. My life might be a hypothetical situation for some people, but for me, it's my life. I live it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Before my husband and I were legally married, the fact that it was offensive that our life was being debated was not the issue. Hurt feelings, offense, opposing opinions were never the issue. The issue was we were legally roommates to each other, which means to say we were legally nothing to each other when it came to medical decisions for an incapacitated partner, or when filing taxes or anything to do with inheritance laws, or for that matter, domestic abuse laws. I find that people calling for open, transparent debate are almost never the ones affected by whatever it is they want to discuss. It has been such a long year. I remember now how long a year is. I'd forgotten, I remember now. And I want to remind people that it has almost always been much, much longer than just 1 year, that someone different than yourself has lived a certain experience by the time you become aware of that experience. New to you does not mean new to the affected party. Debating something like same-sex marriage today, this many years into my legal marriage, is not just annoying or offensive. It's traumatic. It is trauma-inducing. Because for me, and it always was, because that subject for me comes with a history that includes years of actual physical violence, the frequent threat of physical violence, lots of emotional violence, and a way of being in the world even now that is constantly, perpetually vigilant whenever my husband and I step outside our front door. I choose to believe that liberals in particular do not want to cause me further trauma when debating things like same-sex marriage or equal pay for women, even when their views are aligned with mine. I was hungry sometimes as a child because my mom was not paid fairly. There were days when breakfast was the only meal I had, and my mom went completely without so that I would have enough. There was a lot of anger and a lot of sadness in me tied to those memories. I kind of feel like conservatives are not my audience. So if you're liberal, please be aware that calling for open debate on a topic with the intent to help people can simultaneously be traumatic to the people or the person you're trying to help. And giving the forum of open debate to the opposing side can be rage-inducing to me. And what is rage if not trauma being played out? When the subject of equal pay for women comes up, even if it's in a funny sitcom setting, where my mind goes immediately is to the look on my mother's face when I would ask her if there was more food and the answer was no. The sadness, the regret, the shame, the failure was so stark in my mom's eyes that I learned at a very early age, like 8 or 9 years old, to be aware at every single meal of what food had been made. And if I couldn't see that there was more food, I didn't ask, because seeing that look on my mom's face was just too hard. It is rage-inducing to me when I hear women or men talk about why, in their opinion, women should not be paid equally. So please stop giving them the form of open, transparent debate. Open, transparent debate can be a bad thing. It is often not, but it also always has that potential. When debating and discussing, people often forget that what they're talking about is real people and real lived experiences that have gone on for years before the debaters became aware of the subject they're debating. I can't tell you how many undergraduate and graduate academic debates both my husband and I were required to participate in to get our degrees that in all seriousness compared gay men to rapists and child molesters. And as part of those discussions, we were required to treat those points of view as valid discussion points. So I encourage you to just believe people about their experiences. Just believe them. It is never helpful to say, are you sure it wasn't maybe this way instead? 1 year later, I am disappointed and saddened by the responses I've seen to COVID, not just in the general American population, but in so many of my loved ones. It has sometimes been horrifying, but it's also true that just 1 year later, we have a vaccine. And I'll admit for only the second time publicly that I was worried that a vaccine was going to take 2 or 3 years. Can you imagine? 1 year later, it is time to start getting excited again. 1 year later, it is time to move out of just surviving and to start imagining and to start planning, keeping in mind that we are not there yet. I quoted a meme earlier, and I want to close by paraphrasing another meme that said words to the effect that when you're running a marathon, you don't stop when you can see the finish line, right? You go all the way to the finish and then you stop. And that's where we're going to be for a few more weeks, if not maybe a few more months, almost finished. In the meantime, I've been so very proud of UUs all over this country, whose motivations for social distancing and mask wearing and getting vaccinated have been just as much about keeping others safe, even total strangers, as it was about keeping themselves safe. Before COVID, I really believed that that would have been the prevalent attitude among everyone of my personal acquaintance, and it was not. But it has been the prevalent attitude among Unitarian Universalists. Once again, you've sucked me in. In the intro, you were told I'm married to a UU minister, so it's kind of hard to escape you lot. But it is nice to want to be part of this community, and it is nice to be proud of being part of this community. I'm so looking forward to seeing UUs in person again and feeling the relief of tangible community interactions. For now, I'm in a temporary holding pattern that's going to make that day of tangible interactions that much sweeter. Until then, go now in peace, and may the joy of love surround you everywhere you go.
Thank you, Lawrence. Sing with me. People want their lives to matter. Everyone wants their dreams to soar. Anyone can make a difference. the storm. Be gracious, be warm. When you engage, you'll be the change. Let's arrange to be the change.
Unitarian Universalist congregations are fully self-supporting, meaning that members and friends raise all funds for the operating budget, ministries, and programs of the church. We are ever grateful for your gifts of time, treasure, and talent. OCUUC amplifies that spirit of generosity by sharing half of the plate we receive with an organization that shares our values. This month, we are supporting Stand Up for Kids, whose mission is to end the cycle of youth homelessness, one youth at a time. The volunteers and staff are there to empower homeless and at-risk youth toward lifelong personal growth and to create in those youth a sincere belief in themselves through open, straightforward counseling, mentoring, and life skills training. You can find out more about Stand Up for Kids through their website at standupforkids.org. There are multiple ways in which you can support the church and this organization. You can mail a check, you can go through our website, use an app called Give Plus, or by texting. The choice is yours. All the information is on our website, should you need it. And as always, thank you for your generosity.
I went online and joined a virtual choir. I thought my standards couldn't be much higher. I listened to my recording, it was dire. Hardly knew ya. What has happened to ya? I thought I'd sung these pieces once before. Who would have thought my sight reading so poor?
I wobble on the note when I'm not sure which note was I reading. Cliff and key unheeding.
I thought my tone was sweet, but it sounds hoarse. I rush straight on where there ought to be a pause.
Whatever dynamic said, I sang full force. PP or MF, it all sounds like FF.
My voice sounds strained, my vowels aren't quite right. My quietest breath, like a foghorn in the night.
And frankly, my diction is a load of mortification and articulation. I make a break to breathe when lines are long. Sometimes a note were better left unsung.
Then notes are right again, but words are wrong. Oh, when will I ever get them all together?
I love to sing, but when this lockdown's gone, I
Hallelujah.
Please join in singing We Gather Together, a song that puts our intentions into words and expresses our gratitude for the many gifts we share.
We gather together, we gather as one. For peace, love, and justice for everyone. We give from our hearts to show that we care. We can change lives with what we share.
Now is a time when we honor the important events in our lives. You are invited, one and all, whether you are a member, friend, or visitor, to participate in our ritual of joys and sorrows. Perhaps you come here today holding something close to your heart, moments from the last days or hours that have struck you at your core. If you would like to honor such a profound joy or sorrow, you are invited to do so. You can do this by lighting a candle at home. It's a wonderful way to honor what you hold in your heart. If you would like to share your joy or sorrow with the congregation, you can write it in the chat. Let us take a few moments in contemplation as Beth plays some music, and then I will begin reading the joys and sorrows out loud. Please forgive me if I miss a joy or sorrow. You can help me not to miss any by waiting to type comments to express joy or sorrow until we are finished. Lawrence has joy. He had extensive oral surgery 10 days ago, and everything is healing really well. Angie says her 17-year-old daughter gets her second vaccine today. And Sarah says, please keep her brother-in-law in our prayers. He was diagnosed with cancer and will be starting chemo this week. Jolene Chans says, it's great to have a mom and be a mom. And Matthew says, both a joy and concern. The joy, Alex and him are moving into a new apartment soon, and the concern, they are very tight on money and not sure how we're going to handle everything, including food. Virginia sends thoughts for David Frankel AIDS. Let us hold in love all the joys and celebrations and all the hurts and sadness, both spoken and silent. Let our joys remind us to be thankful, our concerns remind us to hope, and our sorrows remind us to connect. Let all these moments remind us that we are not alone. Let us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice and say together, we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are a congregation made up of people who all believe differently, and yet when we gather together, we make up one loving community. We need not think alike to love alike. If you are a guest, a visitor, or someone who hasn't yet been known to us, I invite you to become a part of this beloved community. We encourage you to write in the chat your name and where you are from so we can welcome you. If you would like to know more about our church, including programming for children and youth, please contact us at hello@ocuuc.org and we will help you get connected. In addition, we invite you to sign up for our weekly email called The Blessed at ocuuc.org. We want everyone to feel a part of this beloved community. So please reach out and we will help you get connected. After the benediction, we will have a short period where everyone can wave and say hello. If you would like to stay and chat with Lawrence, feel free to do that, or you can choose to be put in the Zoom breakout groups for 20 minutes or so. We invite you to check in and get to know the people in your group and welcome any visitors. We have a couple of highlighted announcements here. Today at 12:15 p.m., we have LGBTQ action event. And then next week on May 16th, we will have a multi-church events at usual time and usual Zoom link. You can find more details about our church events and programs on our website.
And instead of singing our last chorus the way we usually do, I thought, since it's a year out, that I would sing the verses that go along with this chorus, like I did the very first time we sang this song about a year ago. To my loved ones and relations, with me in spirit every day, and to neighbors I have not yet met, close to home or far away. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. To my friends who make music, sharing joy both far and wide, and to those who we depend on, to teach, to heal, and to guide. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. To all who hear this message, to stranger and to friend, here's an embrace of music until we meet again. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me.
This service is over. Let our service continue.